welcome to DA11, Principles of Auditing, Exam Answering Techniques presentation by presenter Francis Aruturi. The contents of this presentation are introduction, the ZAQA level descriptors, because ZAQA is also an important stakeholder in these exams. Then we'll run through learning outcomes, syllabus topics, main command words, exam format, general competence expected of a graduate of this course, and then definitely we'll go through the topics, past examination questions. We'll also look at the extracts from suggested solutions and the extracts from a chief examiner's report, and then we'll conclude. Introduction. What we are saying is the objective of the presentation is to orient ZICA students on the exam answering techniques, because most of the answers do not meet the required professional standards. So after this presentation, we expect ZICA students will be well equipped to answer future examinations. Expectations definitely is an improvement in the poor performance noticed in DA11 Principles of Auditing. Now, Zambia Qualifications Authority level descriptors, like I said, ZAQA is an important stakeholder in these examinations. They have defined foundational competences, which is simply based on knowledge. What can a graduate comprehend and also be able to demonstrate that they've understood? Then practical competences, that is more application. So if you are given a scenario, please try to demonstrate that you can apply your knowledge to the scenario. Reflective skills, those are a bit advanced, and we normally say this in advanced auditing. Now, these are of great interest to various stakeholders. Like I say, ZICA qualifications are not just about ZICA. It's about a lot of stakeholders, including your employers and other key stakeholders. Learning outcomes. Okay. Again, what you see is from the command words, the first three are talking about explaining. Then learning outcome number 4, talking about demonstrating. Again, learning outcome number 5, evaluate. We go back to explain, learning outcome number 6. Then we go to identify and describe. And then the last one, learning outcome number 8, talking about evaluate. Now, evaluating is a high-level verb. So you have to make sure that you appreciate what it really means. We come to syllabus topics. Now, syllabus topics, the weightings are very important because they can guide you. That's why you find when you look at the various papers, there are certain topics which are highly examinable. Like internal controls are given a weighting of 20, including audit evidence in specific areas. We've got weightings of 20. So meaning those, come what may, will carry a larger portion of the marks in any exam. Okay? If you look at audit planning also, they've got 15. Okay? You look at audit techniques, how do you get your evidence? Another 15. Ethics, 10. But overall, that should actually give you an idea of how the marks can be spread in a question tape. The main command words, like I've said, we've run through the learning outcomes there. Now, learning outcomes gives us how the examiners will be pitching their questions. Because if they don't pitch them like that, then definitely, strictly speaking, that exam may not be, valid. So it's important that the command words are also appreciated by the people who are going to sit these exams. There's define there. Define is just giving the exact meaning of. Then state is a simple low-level verb. List, low-level verb. Explain is highly used in these exams. So it's important that we are able to explain. Explain is make clear. Okay? You've got other verbs like apply, demonstrate, discuss. Again, discuss a bit high level because we expect you to examine in detail by argument. So both sides before you conclude. Evaluate, like we saw in learning outcome number 8, there was evaluate. Evaluate simply means appraising, or you assess the value of something. So many, again, you discuss both sides, and then you conclude appropriate. Assess, identify, okay? Most of the question will say identify and explain. Now, if you can't explain, at least try to identify, because that will be an easy aspect for you. Then describe, and also recommend. Recommending, please propose a course of action. Now, this is auditing. Whatever you're recommending must be based by proper professional knowledge, and including professional judgment. Exam format. You find that at this level, the purpose of the diploma in accountants is to develop downstream and intermediate level accounting personnel who can support that value addition in accounting profession. Okay, they find that the format itself is simply section A has 2 questions which are compulsory. Each question is 25 marks each. They add up to 50. Section B, there are 2 questions to be attempted out of 3. It also gives another 50. So it's important that you appreciate the format. 3 hours is allowed. You've got 15 minutes reading time. If you use that 15 minutes properly, chance of passing in auditing is very high, because that 15 minutes can be used to plan your answers, jot down a few things you can remember, and the like. Then general competence is expected. Expected by who? By a lot of stakeholders. So when you carry the tag of accountant or auditor, just know the number of expectations. Things like communication skills. We know that most of you do self-study on business communications. But please, that is a very important ingredient into this course, because you'll be required to communicate, write reports, So if you don't have communication skills, definitely, it will not be working into your advantage. Then problem solving, team skills, people management, customer service skills, results orientation. So all these are supported by the approved syllabus by Zik. Now the topics we're talking about will be divided into topic 1 up to the last topic. So you find that under each topic, we are going to have past exam questions, extracts from suggested solutions, and also extracts from the chief examiner's report. My focus will be mainly on the requirements for these past examination questions, because that's where most of the problems are. The suggested solutions and the examiner's report are part of the presentation. Okay, once in a while I'll comment on them, but I'll not go into much detail. Then topic 1, purpose and context of audit. This is simply the audit framework. What is auditing all about? The concept of audit and assurance, appointment, removal, resignation of auditors, auditors' rights and duties. At your level, you must know. Once you've done auditing at this stage, you must know this thing. That's what makes auditing. So, a past question from December 2022, question 1. Under part A, students were required to explain the steps that Sherry Chartered Accountants and Lilai PLC should take with regards to the resignation of Sherry Chartered Accountants as auditors. So what is important there is resignation. Okay. If you want to get the marks for this question, there were 5 marks available. If you wanted all the 5 marks, you need to demonstrate knowledge, okay, as guided by the Companies Act on how auditors must resign. The simple things are things like the auditor must be able to do a resignation letter. That must be deposited, okay, at the company's head office. Okay. And also the circumstances leading to that resignation, because people want to know. Okay. And then if possible, request for some meeting, extraordinary meeting, where these members of this company are supposed to. So there's that procedure well laid down in the Companies Act. Again, the companies are replicated in the textbook for Zik. So if you had that knowledge, the all 5 marks were yours. Okay. So Charles Solution has tabulated the steps. The examiner's report is saying the question was fairly answered, so most of the students were able to demonstrate that they knew the procedures on resigning. However, wrong answers mistook this question for procedures when an auditor is removed. So removal and resignation are 2 different aspects. Question 3, March 2023. Okay. The question under part A wanted students to state and explain 4 ways in which Zika regulates accountants. Now you're a member of Zik. There's no way you can demonstrate ignorance in these cardinal issues. And the examiner even saying state. So for stating, you may have got 2 marks. Explaining another 2 marks makes 4. So we must know that Zika regulates accountants in Zambia, starting from when they are registering you as students, all the way up to able to get your practice certificates. Zika does regulation. And you are disciplined. If you are found wanting in 1 or 2 areas, you can be disciplined. The West is even being excluded from membership. That must be appreciated at this level. And then part C talked about explain what an agreed upon procedure is and state the type of assurance that is expected from such an engagement. Now, definitely, if you don't know what agreed upon procedure is, you cannot answer this question. Okay? Now, agreed upon procedure is where the client, like the third party, agree on some procedures. They sit down with the auditors, tell the auditors, please, can you carry out these procedures? Now, what the auditor does, he just goes there, carries out those procedures. That's it. He will not give any assurance. You just bring the findings. He does not know what the client wants to do with the findings. So it would be very societal for the auditor to give an opinion or an assurance. Okay? So if you knew part of that, you may have got something from the 4 marks. But you'd find that most of us did not even attempt it. Most of the students did not attempt. Okay? Which works against them. There's also a question from June 2022. Okay, question 2. Under part A, there's explain the difference between review engagement and external audit engagement. Now, this was only 2 marks. Okay? Now, 2 marks does not mean that you write a lot. All you have to do is just write what you may know. Yes, a lot of areas, if you look at the examiner suggested solution, there are a lot of things written there. But definitely in an exam, we don't expect you to write like that. Okay, because there's only 2 marks there. Okay? In a review engagement, you're not doing a lot of work. So even the way you come out is more of a limited assurance, which means negative assurance. Nothing has come to my attention to believe that these things have not been done properly. In an external audit engagement, there's more work done. Since there's more work done, which means you come out positive. If you're happy, the financial statements are showing a true and fair view. Those are just 2 marks, so you shouldn't have given a lot of. But most of the students, even those who knew, waste a lot of time by writing a lot. Please check the marks allocation. In fact, it's one of the instructions. The marks allocation represents the required depth and length of the question. Question from September 2022 examination, part A. Explain 2 procedures that Zambezi should have followed when removing. Now removal comes. Again, there was only 2 marks. So if you knew these procedures as guided by the standards, by the Companies Act, you should have got the 2 marks. Please don't write, they're saying explain 2. Explain 2. If you write more than 2, you're disadvantaged. If you've got more than 2, get your best 2. Then September 2022, examination, part A. Using the information provided above, explain the meaning of the following terms: accountability, stewardship. 2 marks, 2 marks. Again, don't write a lot. Just demonstrate to the examiner that you know what accountability means. Accountability simply means being answerable. Okay? You must be able to justify your actions, as well as managers, directors. Stewardship, you are keeping other people's property. These companies which are being run, the managers are not the owners. So they are running them on behalf. So they must make sure that they demonstrate that they are good stewards, they are keeping the assets properly. Okay? So those 2 marks were a giveaway again. But students who did not know accountability, stewardship, which is not proper at this stage, lost those marks. There's another question. Part E simply say using 2 examples explain. Okay? So explain using 2 examples the meaning of the term expectation gap. Okay? Now expectation gap is simply what auditors know they are supposed to do according to what the Companies Act is saying, also according to the professional guidance, versus what people think you do. So you have to know that there's that gap. Then you give 2 examples. Okay? 2 examples, the easiest example is on fraud. Okay? Most of the public expect that auditors are primarily responsible for fraud detection and prevention. That is something you can give as an example. But again, it's only 4 marks. Check the 4 marks, plan your answers, give to my examples, and also explain the meaning of the term. You get your marks. Don't just explain without giving examples, because then you'll just be answering part of the question. Then we go to topic 2. Topic 2 is about corporate governance and codes of ethics. These are very important because as accountants, as auditors, there have been a lot of scandals where, some of these have not painted a good picture about the profession. So as you are coming out, as you are going through this subject, you must demonstrate that you are up to the task, you know these topics. So question 1 from December 2022, required. Under part B, you are required to explain the matter of concern with regards to corporate governance of Rely PLC. So again, all you need to do is to go into the question, Rely PLC, what was there, and discuss that. The marks were only 2, which means there were not a lot of issues. Then under number 2, B2, students were required to explain 4 functions of the audit committee. That is knowledge-based. If you know what an audit committee does, then audit committee does, then definitely the 8 marks were yours. If you don't know, can't guess. Audit committee is one of the important committees of the board of directors. They add that needed credibility to the financial statements. They also give a channel to these finance managers, the external auditors, the internal auditors, to bring out those controversial issues. So it's important that every student of auditing at our level appreciates that aspect of corporate governance. Then December 2022, again, question 4 at something. So you can see the same question paper can have a number of things about this governance. Just depends on how they are, pitched. So B was explained 4 ethical matters in the audit of the financial statements of Kilimanjaro Limited. Now, which means you cannot discuss ethical matter if you don't even know issues to do with integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, your confidentiality, and also professional behavior. It's important that you appreciate those, because from there, that's where the threats may come from. If you don't know those, you may not even appreciate. So it's important that we know the ethical matters, and please don't define those or answer the question being asked. It's explained from Kilimanjaro Limited. So there were issues of assignment of PD as audit manager. Okay, this chap had worked for the client, so meaning you cannot do that. Okay, there'll be that self-review threat and familiarity threats. I do not just be discussing one. Some of the ethical threats may have more than one. Self-interest threat, review threats, familiarity, intimidation, more than one. So if you're able to discuss those, explain them. But if you can't, please restrict to what you know. June 2022, question 4. The requirement under part 1 was identify and explain. So you can see, for identify, you get a few marks. Explain, you get some more marks. So even if you don't know much, please try to identify. Use a scenario to give you those needed marks. 5 ethical threats. Again, don't give more than 5 or less than 5. Try to give 5. There's a tendency of most students giving more than 5 or less than 5. You give more than 5, you've wasted time. You give less than 5, you've lost marks. So it's important that you just respond to what the question is saying. And we are talking about Wamaka, okay, audit. So it's a scenario there. You pick from there. Don't give general answers. Then for each threat, explain how it might be reduced. So talking about safeguards. So meaning you've identified the threats and explained them. So do a tabular format. Do a table so that you can answer the all aspects of the question. If you don't do that, you'll find that missing one part is actually a possibility. And that can disadvantage your marks unnecessarily. So it's important that you do a table. Then engagement partner there's a P part where we're told that the engagement partner, inform the audit team that it is very important to communicate with those child governors. Those child governors are simply the board of directors. Okay? We may not say board of directors all the time, because some may not have board of directors, they may have board of trustees and the like. So maybe those child governors a bit more general. So again, that is general knowledge. If you knew your ESA 260, it's very easy to get those 5 marks. If you did not know, you'll be guessing. Okay? But again, like I normally say, do not present yourself in an exam without any knowledge. You'll be living in danger. Auditing is a very specialized subject, which the solution solution is presented. Okay, make sure that you appreciate the tables. Okay, and then we have another question from June 2022. Okay, question 5. Okay, under the requirement was identify 2 weaknesses in the governance system of Book Company Limited, and explain again to partner. Explain how to overcome these weaknesses. So don't spend a lot of time identifying, because you're also required to explain. Again, focus on the material given in the question. Don't focus outside question. It's only 4 marks. Then explain under part 2, explain 5 challenges that the company will face when developing governance structures and systems of internal control. In the question, we are given that this company is a small company. Now, small company may not have the resources. So when you are dealing with small companies, be careful. Most of the recommendations work well for large companies. Small companies, it's a bit difficult. Resources are lacking. Some of the things like segregation of duties, audit committees may be a luxury. Okay, but you have to discuss that. There were 5 marks given, 5 challenges to be talked about, and you got your marks. September 2022, question 1, had some aspects. Part B required students to identify. Again, like I've said, identifying, go to the scenario, get some marks, and explain 3 ethical threats. Maybe explanations may be poor, but please, if you go through a number of past papers, you will try to improve your explanation skills, including this presentation. Look at the suggested solutions, the way they are presented. They should be able to actually appreciate. Like we are talking about a tabular format. Like they are saying here, identify and explain ethical threats, 3 of them. Don't go beyond the 3. Yes, suggested solution may go beyond the 3 because they want to illustrate. But in the real exam, be responsive, answer the number of threats talked about, and suggest appropriate what? Safeguards. So if you do a tabular format again, you are capturing both aspects of the question. Now, safeguards, please avoid decline. Yes, decline may be a safeguard in some areas where it's critical. But if you're always using them, even if they may make sense, they are not very much. Because you're in business, you need to do business. Most of the issues we talk about can be resolved through discussions, either with management or with those charged with governance, unless it's absolutely critical. That's what you can say we are going to decline this assignment. Topic 3, internal audit. Okay, difference between internal audit and external audit. Okay, the internal scope. What we should know is internal audit are simply employees. Where they come from, also they are employees. So they are the direction of the company. In big organizations where they've got good corporate governance structures, internal auditors will report to the audit committee to make them more effective. Okay, external auditors are outsiders. The focus of external auditors is financial statements. Okay, if you are going to give external auditors other duties, just know that they will need you to sign another engagement letter for those duties. But internal auditors can do anything as guided by the company. So, extract from example question 1, December 2022. Part C required us to explain. Again, the command word, explain. Please, students, go through this presentation, especially on command words, and appreciate what explain means. Because some of us, instead of explaining, we make things difficult. Explain is simply make things clear. Okay? So explain 4 advantages to rely PLC of outsourcing internal audit services. Now, most students who have problems, if they don't understand, for example, what outsourcing is. Outsourcing is simply getting those services from an outsider. Okay, that's outsourcing. Now, if you don't know that, and for this question, they're not talking about disadvantages, they're talking about advantages. So if you knew those outsourcing at whatever, there should be no problem. If you outsource internal audit services, you find that those guys may be cheaper. Okay, maybe cheaper. June 2022, question 2, as an aspect of this topic. So part B said, explain 4 benefits of establishing an internal audit department. Just benefits. Okay. Because you find that an internal auditor, like I said, is very important, especially on issues of maybe systems. Okay, they do a lot of work. You don't expect external auditors to do a lot of work on the system. No, external auditors, like we said, external auditors, their main focus is financial statements. Internal auditors can do a lot of work. They can even be the auditor for the board papers. They can even be, guiding the company on governance issues. So it's important that we appreciate that internal auditors can do more to the company. There was a scenario given. So in that scenario, there's some weakness here and there. You would have used it to actually, answer this well. Get the 4 marks. Another question on the same topic simply said, explain 5 disadvantages to the company of outsourcing internal auditors. The other one was advantages. This one now comes to disadvantages. So those who like memorizing would have reproduced an answer on advantages, not knowing the examiner had moved to disadvantages. Okay? So as long as the guy said you know you're outsourcing, what it means, it's very easy for you to appreciate this. When you outsource, just so that those chaps may be doing the same work for others. So maybe your confidential thing maybe lose out. It can also become expensive if you're not monitoring them. Make sure that even if you outsource, there's a mechanism of monitoring these services. Topic 4, audit planning, risk and documentation. Again, in professional assignments like auditing, we normally believe that if you do not plan, you're already planning to fail. So audit planning is very important. Again, risk assessment, as guided by our ISA 315, we must make sure that we are able to appreciate the aspect of risk. Because if you do not carry out a risk assessment, you may not know the client, you may not know the environment, you may be wasting a lot of time on safe areas. So it's important to identify your risk areas so that more work, more resources go towards addressing those risk areas. Audit documentation, we are guided by ISA 230 on documentation. Make sure that documentation is properly done on a timely basis, because that is what gives us the evidence that work was performed according to our requirements of professional standards. Okay? Also, the partners are not part of the donkey work. The partners are there. They will rely on the documentation in most cases to give their opinion. December 2022, question 1. Part D, said distinguish between business and audit risks. Okay? So you needed to do that. Then it went further to say, and explain why auditors may be concerned with business risk. Now, 4 marks were at stake there. So you needed to talk about business risk, talk about audit risk, distinguish them. So business risk has nothing to do with the financial statements. Business risk has to do with the company failing to achieve its objectives. Audit risk has to do with the auditor failing to give a proper opinion, an appropriate opinion on the financial statements. Okay? Now you find that auditors will be concerned about business risk because business risk is part of audit risk through the inherent risk, because audit risk is made up of 3 components: inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. So you find that for auditors, that business risk may be part of inherent risk. That's why they get concerned about it. But again, keep your answers to the point, because the 4 marks is not a lot of marks. So if you knew, most of the chaps who know disadvantages by writing a lot as if they are talking about 10 marks. Even the suggested solutions, please, they are there with a lot of detail, maybe deliberately, just make sure that people can also learn some of the other things from there. Otherwise, in an exam, you are sitting an exam, you're not expected to produce such detail. December 2022, question 3, also had an aspect of this topic. Under A, students were required to explain the audit risk, straightforward, with regards to the figure of obsolescence, okay, in the financial statement of Gilmore Industries Limited. That's for 4 marks. So the issue was audit risk, but relating to obsolete items. Okay? Now, obsolete items simply means their valuation will be lower than cost. That's what the main focus of the auditor must be, to verify that how they valued these obsolete things. They must have used an amount which is less than cost. Then under part 2, explain 6. So again, you respect the number 6. Don't give less, don't give more. Okay, like I said, you give more, you're losing on time. You give less, you're losing marks. So explain 6 audit procedure that should be performed regarding the figure for obsolescence in the financial statements. Okay, so again, they are guiding you on what they want. But again, make sure that you understand obsolescence, okay, and that aspect of valuation. December 2022, question 5, had an aspect also. The requirement under part B1 was explain the audit risk model. That was straightforward because we're talking about the components now, your inherent risk, control risk, detection risk. That should have been straightforward, knowledge-based. And the how Again, when there is and, just so that there are two parts to this question. So answer both parts to maximize on your marks. How the auditor can manage audit risk. Auditor can only manage audit risk through playing around influencing detection risk. They have no responsibility on inherent risk or control risk. Then identify and explain 5 audit risks in the question. So they are given a scenario, just go to the scenario, identify, and explain. If you're not able to explain, but at least identify. So to get half of them. There were 10 marks available. Get 5 just for identify. June 2022, again, question 1 had an aspect there where the students were required to identify and explain. Again, 5 audit risks. So if you had looked at the other paper, you'd find that you'd have answered this. So it's important to prepare adequately because most of these are just repeated, okay? Because it's a concept which matters, okay? And when they say, you also give the audit responses, like under B, describe audit responses. I'm not talking about management responses, no. I'm talking about what would auditors do when now start auditing. Okay, so it's make sure, so identify audit risk is under ISA 350, responses ISA 330. So make sure that you appreciate those standards because they're a very important component in these environments. Then we've got March 2023, question 1. Part B simply said, explain 5 factors that should be considered by auditors when determining materiality benchmarks. Now, materiality is well articulated in ISA 320. A student must know that, okay? Yes, there are those benchmarks which can be used. And don't forget, at the end of the day, we have to use our professional judgment. That's why it's important for us to appreciate, okay, to understand, carry out a risk assessment, understand the internet environment for us to be able to come up with these benchmarks. Issues like profitability, what are stakeholders mainly concerned with? If I'm a shareholder, my interest is the dividends. Dividends come from where? From profits. So I may use profitability as a very important benchmark as an auditor. Others may think assets. I want to see my business is growing. So asset may be an important benchmark. The industries, all those things, the risks involved, all those can be used as benchmark. And at the end of the day, materiality is a question of professional judgment. Then under C, students were required to explain. And again, the term explain, you list, you get few marks. Explain, giving examples, 3 examples, information that should be included in an audit plan. If you know your ISA 300, that should not be a problem because if you look at the manuals, those things are just a matter of recording and then be able to demonstrate those foundational competences. Describe and distinguish, bring out those differences between interim and final audits. So you find that most of these audits are done in more than one sitting. Interim audits may be done before the year end because if you want to look at the system, systems cannot be, they're always there, so you don't have to wait for the year end. Final audits normally are done after the year end. So it's important that we appreciate. But there are only 4 marks. So you check the marks also because they give you that zeal to attempt it. Because if there are 4 marks, you know some can get 1 or 2 marks. It's not good. It's not bad compared to not writing anything at all. Then identify and explain audit risks. Okay, so again the same thing. But there you are required to categorize them under inherent risk, control risk, and detection. If you did not do that, you end less marks or no marks at all. Then under E, you are required to explain how the audit firm can assess risk of material misstatements. Now, risk of material misstatements is made up of inherent risk and control risk. If you want to discuss detection risk, you're not answering the question being asked. September 2022, question 1. Part C, 1, required student to explain 2 methods that zone chartered accountants can use in order to gain an understanding of the Zambezi Limited risk and business environment. So whatever, if you know, no problem. Things like inspection, inquiries, analytical reviews, they are straightforward things, which should be. But again, you come with knowledge. They're talking about 2. Don't give more than 2. Then 2, part C2, say explain 3 overall responses. So again, 3, give 3. Your responses which that zone chartered accountants can use when responding to significant risks. Now, significant risks are those risks which require special audit attention. There are only 3 marks. So all you need to do is, instead of it stating, instead of explaining, because explain is a bit higher, you would have stated, you would have got those 3 marks. Then topic 5, internal control. Okay, talking about the control environment, testing the controls, then specific accounting area, sales, purchasing, inventory, wages. When you're approaching such questions, you must appreciate that you are also part of the business environment. You go shopping, you buy this, you do what. So don't forget about what you do or what you're subjected to. That can also add to your answer, because the answers have to be practical. That's why examiners bring scenarios so that they see how you can connect with the practical world. So December 2022, question 2, required students to explain, under part C, explain 4 methods that auditors can use in recording the accounting and controls. So it's 4 marks. You don't even have to explain, because when you explain a lot, those 4 marks may be a bit on the lower side. But please appreciate they then explain briefly. Okay, things like narrative notes, questionnaires, checklists, okay, flow charts, all those can be. They're in the textbooks. So that's why it's important, like we always say, get guidance, get to read the textbooks. Then D wanted you to explain 5 typical procedures that can be carried out during the interim audit. So if you knew the interim audit, like I said, interim audits are normally carried out before, and their main focus is on what? Testing controls, looking at the systems. And also we carry out a few substantive tests. December 2022, question 2, had an aspect about this topic. So under part A1, suggest and explain 6 internal control activities in the purchases and inventory system of Kilimanjaro. And then for each, under part 2, for each inventory activity, suggest, explain 1 suitable test of control. So again, a table there will do the trick, so to get the all 12 marks which are variable. So you get 6, and each of the 6 activity, make sure you do. So the table is your remedy if you want to get maximum marks. If you don't do a table, the chance of you answering on part of the question is very, very high. December 2022, question 5. Okay. Also as an aspect, under part A, state 3 elements of internal control. Only 3. Don't go, we know there are 5, but don't go to 5. Just mention what? The 3. Get your marks. It's knowledge-based. In C1, explain the objectives and principles of using test data. Now, test data is a very important aspect. That's why when you are testing controls, in a computerized environment especially, you find it works well. So make sure that if you know what test data was, you would have answered whatever followed, because everything else under part C was test data, test data. So make sure you're able to appreciate test data and also the auto, and then just the cuts in general. Then June 2022, question 1, okay, was about part C, requiring students to explain the meaning of information technology audits. That should be straightforward. There are only 2 marks. So 2 marks, don't waste a lot of time. Okay, just write what you know about. In information technology audits, our main focus is the controls. Because yes, IT is convenient, but also brings in, control issues. Then explain briefly 2 disadvantages of using ICQs and ICE. So ICQ is looking for the existence of desirable controls in a system. ICEQ is looking for whether misstatements could occur. So it's up to the client to tell us. So you find that in most cases, ICQs, the answers are not very clear. They're a bit vague. That's why most of them prefer ICQs. But ICQs, again, you may miss out on what the client has. It was only 4 marks. So you planned your answer nicely, you'd have got 1 or 2 things from them. Part C required students to identify 5 weaknesses. Now, when you're identifying, they are not being told to explain. So just identify 5, and then they went on to require you to explain their consequences. So again, make sure that you explain those weaknesses, what can happen. For example, frauds can go unnoticed, and also provide a recommendation. So again, a table would have done the trick. Those are 15 marks available. So the table is shown in the presentation under the suggested what? Examination solution by the examiner. Under Part A, you are required, as students were required to explain to the junior auditors 5 control objectives. Now, don't give controls. Talking about control objectives. What are we trying to prevent by having those controls? If you're going to give controls or tests of controls, you're not answering the question. Under Part B, identify, not explain, identify 5 weaknesses in the payroll. So you have to dig in, go to the scenario being given there, and then pluck out the weaknesses. Then suggest 5 ways in which those weaknesses can be overcome. Again, table now becomes very relevant. And then for Part D, it requires you to suggest tests of controls. So all that would have been answered just by using a table. Again, this presentation has made it possible. What it has done is to give you the suggested solution so that you can see how tables can be done so that you enhance your chance of passing. September 2022, okay, at an aspect of this, so we're saying under Part D1, identify and explain 5 weaknesses in purchasing, okay, and also recommend under Part 2. So again, a table brings out what they want there. In September 2022, you'd find that your required students were required under Part B, explain 3 ways in which segregation of duties can help management to strengthen its internal. Segregation of duties, making sure that no one does everything from start to the end, from cradle to grave. Okay? There should be people. Now, what that does is, if there is fraud to be committed, they have to collude. Okay? If there are errors, they are checking on each other. Normally, there are fewer errors because of that. So from that angle, you should have earned the 3 marks. Then under C, explain the meaning of tests of controls in an audit of financial statements. Now that is 1 mark. 1 mark, don't write pages and send it and say, When you're testing controls, as well as just trying to check how effective the controls are in practice. Straight away, and then move on. Then Part 2 wanted you to using 2 methods of obtaining evidence. Give an example. But again, there are only 2 marks. So in auditing, be careful, check the mark allocation. Because if you just read the question minus look at the check mark allocation, you may think the examiners want you to write a lot of things, and in the process you lose out on time. Topic 6, audit evidence, techniques. We have some issues to do sampling. Because auditors, when you say audit evidence, we're talking about what you're going to collect must be sufficient and appropriate to support your audit opinion. Now, the guidance is in ISA 500, most of it. So make sure that you go through ISA 500. Now, sampling again, that's ISA 530. Make sure that we go, because auditors are collecting evidence. In most cases, they are sampling. Now, when you sample, definitely you must make sure that the sample is representative of the population. Because if you don't do that, then you may, because you're giving an opinion about the population, about the entire financial statement, not just about the sample. So that projection is very, very important of errors. Okay? And then financial statement assertions, those are the claims or representations embodied in the financial statements, which you as auditors are trying to what? Verify. Now, if you don't know about financial statement assertions, you may not even talk about audit procedures in a convincing manner. Most of your answers will be wrong. Then accounting estimates, you'd find the financial statements contain both facts and estimates, things like provisions. As auditors, we know that accounting estimates are is a risk area. So you may want to understand, how did management come up with this? You've got your ISA 540 to guide you on accounting estimates. Then CATs, okay, computer-assisted audit techniques, your audit software, your test data, all those must appreciate, because if the clients are computerized, who are we as auditors not to be computerized? Because there's times when you cannot audit minus what? CATs. Because the client is highly specialized, highly computerized. So it's always important that we appreciate these things when we're doing these auditing what? Courses. Now, December 2022, question 2, at an aspect. Part A1 required you to explain the meaning of sampling risk. It's only 2 marks. So sampling risk, you pick a wrong sample, you come up with a wrong conclusion about the population. Sampling risk. Then A2, Explain. Again, watch the verbs being used. It's explain, explain. So explaining, say something to make whatever you're talking about clear. Explain the procedure for selecting samples for tests designed to discover errors and test whatever. So if you knew that, it's more of a textbook. Then June 2022, question 1 had an aspect of this, aspect. Under part C, students were required to explain the meaning of IT audits. Again, I think that is straightforward. Like I said, just focus on the controls. June 2022, question 4, you find that under part B2, students were required to explain the meaning of random sampling and state 2 advantages of random sampling, 2 marks. Now, because there are 2 parts there, so play around with your answer properly. So answer planning will do the trick. So don't write too much for only what? 2 marks. Then identify and explain 3 factors which influence the reliability of audit evidence. So the reliability of evidence is very, very important. Okay? There are those generalizations. For example, what we get from external is more reliable than what we get from internal. What is written is more reliable than what is oral. Okay? What auditors generate themselves more reliable than what they get second-hand. So it's always important that we appreciate those aspects. Again, this is simply knowledge-based, which is highly highlighted in your textbooks. Zika provides both physical study manuals and kits and also electronic. If you cannot access the physical, go electronic, please. But make sure that before you present yourself to these examinations, you have gone through these relevant materials. September 2022, you'd find there's an aspect of that, and we're required part 3. We're required to explain 2 ways in which external auditors can respond to audit risk. It was only 2 marks relating to accounting estimates. So if you knew your ESA 540, there should be no big problem. Like I said, one of the most important things is you want to appreciate how did management come up with these estimates. Since you're also not as an accountant, you can also come up with your own independent estimate and then compare. If you're lacking, maybe it's very specialized, involve an expert, auditor expert. Then topic 7, audit evidence, specific areas now. So going through the tangible non-current assets, inventory, receivables, cash and bank, payables and accruals, non-current assets, share capital, reserves, director emoluments, okay, and then also some part of a bit of introduction to non-profit making organization. But what is important is, if an examiner is asking about receivables, don't talk about inventory. Somebody is asking about payables. Talk about cash and bank. So make sure that you appreciate what specific audit procedures or evidence I would require in a specific area. December 2022, question 4, part C required students to explain 5. Okay, you give 5 audit procedures that should be performed on bank balances. There were 5 marks available. So meaning each procedure carried 1 mark. And in auditing, it's always important for you to spread the marks across the requirements, because if you do not do that, you may be writing a lot for only a few marks. So just 1 procedure, well explained, but in most cases, you find that explaining a procedure is more like stating. Okay? But when you say explain, we just want the examiner to appreciate what assertion are you trying to, verify, and also what documents are you trying to look at, and what's your objective. So if you connect those things, at least explanation will be more convincing to the examiner. You find the examiner's report said the students performed well, but overall, students don't perform well in these areas, right? Because most of them do not look at the financial statement assertion before suggesting procedures. So June 2022, part D, describe 4 substantive procedures that will be performed to obtain sufficient on bank balances again. So you find that bank balance is coming in and then, but again you start on that. Why is the examiners just, at times, examiners also appreciate where are the students lacking. If they are lacking, they'll keep repeating the same thing until students are able to demonstrate that, they've got this concept. Where cash and bank is concerned, whether you like it or not, everyone is a potential thief. So it's important that we appreciate this point as students of auditing, so that we are able to appreciate and do the right procedures to get that sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. June 2022, question 3, under B1, it required students to explain 5 financial statement assertions. That's explaining. Okay. But you have to relate that to audit of revenue. If it was not related to audit of revenue, no marks were given. Revenue, we are guided by IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, number 15. So make sure that would have been in your mind. I'm not saying if you've ever done financial reporting, you cannot pass. You can still pass, because revenue is something we work with throughout. Then describe, again, the verb there, command word there, describe 5 audit procedures. Make sure that you're able to bring out that. But in relation to the payroll expense, which was in the scenario. Then describe 5 audit procedures again, okay, in relation to receivables balance. So you can see there are specific aspects there. Don't mix them. You mix them, you get no marks. So you get few marks if you're lucky. Then question 5, March 2023. It brought out a number of important issues. For example, they said under part C, describe suitable substantive procedures. No, don't forget, substantive procedures is very different from test of controls. Substantive procedures, there are certain aspects of financial statements you'd want to substantiate. So it's always important that we bring out those aspects. You want to see where there are material misstatements, either due to fraud or error. That's your substantive procedures. So they required us to look at plant and equipment, provision for court claims, where your IS 37 comes in, director's emoluments, and cash in hand. So those were 3 marks, 3 marks. At the end of the day, you would have got 12 marks. So each solution is given, but please be careful. Each solution contains more than what we expect you to write in an exam. So these solutions are there to guide you on what you can get from and then be able to answer the question asked. September 2022, okay, there was an aspect also, explain the difference between positive and negative confirmation. Positive, you find that the receivable especially is required to respond whether they agree with the balance or disagree. Negative is a bit, you only respond if you disagree. If you agree, you keep quiet. So there are 4 marks there. If you knew, no problem. The same thing went into number 2 and also number 3. When you are doing your receivables, don't just try to confirm all the balances. There are special balances like new balances, negative, which require to be part of the sample you're trying to confirm. Now, under question 4, September 2022, there was an aspect, explain 5 financial statement assertions in relation to again, this is something we've already seen. But the most important thing is explaining financial statement assertions. Not in general, but relating to property, plant, and equipment. Easiest thing, existence, valuation, rights and obligations. And then also part C requires you to say something, 2 audit procedures for each of the elements: share capital, share equity, issued share capital, transfer of share, dividends, whatever. The beauty with these areas is it's guided by the Companies Act. No one can do any changes to share capital without following laid down legal procedures. So from that angle, it makes auditing easy, because there are those safeguards legal. Even companies must have board minutes. So you should go to the board minutes, check those board meetings, the minutes, what are they saying about those changes, were they authorized, okay? And then make sure that you also appreciate as an auditor. That's why you do company law. You do company so you can appreciate these aspects when it comes to auditing. September 2022, question 5. The aspect under part A required us as students to explain. Again, the word explain there. Even part B, explain. Audit procedure that can be used, audit of inventory, held by third parties. If you do not bring out inventory held by third parties, you're discussing general, you don't get the marks. That's why auditing, spend a few minutes, even a few seconds, trying to understand what is this question about? What are the key issues being brought up? Then B2 to explain. 3, okay, not less, not more, follow-up procedures that should be carried out after attendance at inventory count. Because when you have to have attended, Definitely as an auditor now, you'd want to make sure that whatever was counted is what is being included in the accounts. So valuation becomes very important. And that valuation must be in accordance with IS2, the law of cost and net realizable value. There are also other aspects there, 2 marks. Then you see, describe. Again, the word being used is describe. But don't get intimidated. As long as you can say something sensible, again, and adding a bit of meat to your answer, can earn a few good marks there. Topic number 8, review and reporting. Okay, subsequent events. Okay, accounting standard IS10. Most of us might have done financial reporting, so we know that when you are preparing accounts, if the year end is, for example, the 1st December 2023, events not stop happening, they'll still continue happening. Now, some of those events will be adjusting events, others will be non-adjusting events. Now, adjusting events will provide us with evidence of what existed at the period end. That's why we call them adjusting events. We have to adjust. While non-adjusting events will not provide us with what existed there. So if they are material, we disclose them. But as auditors, our issue is to make sure that we carry out some tests. Now, we must be active up the time we sign our report, as guided by ISA 560. After that, we have a passive responsibility. But before we sign the audit report, please, active responsibility. Make sure you're able to carry out procedures. Look at the board minutes. Okay, look at the word, at least look at the number of things so that you're able to appreciate what can be either adjusting or unadjusting events, and how the management is treating those things. You can also inquire from management, because we expect managers to also be on top of things. We've talked about IS10. That's preparer's problem. Then going concern. Again, our IS1 talks about going concern. The assumption that this company will continue the foreseeable future. Now, most of the companies may prepare accounts using going concern. But if you look at the facts, they are not a going concern. So, meaning, strictly speaking, we must query that as auditors, as guided by ISA 570. Query that, and then tell them maybe to change, to break up cases. So that's the whole idea. So as an auditor, please, yours is to ensure that the accounts are showing a true and fair view. If that's not the case, we have to query. If nothing is being done about it, discussions have been held, we may have to modify our audit reports. Even our audit opinion may have to be modified. Written representations, we may want management to put certain things in writing. So again, ISA 580 gives a lot of details. So we expect students to know ISA 580 in this area. Although we are told written representations are not a credible source of evidence on its own. So it must be supported by something. Then overall review of financial statements. This is now carried out by a very senior person. So a very senior person should be able now to try to make sense out of the financial statements. Okay? How is the accounting treatment? Are there consistency? Are there any changes? If there are any changes, have the company adhered to IS 8 requirements? Okay? So all those things must be done at this level by senior auditors, not junior, senior auditor, managerial level. Then the auditor's report. The auditor's report is very important. That's what comes out. You may be auditing for 3 months. At the end of the day, all that work is reduced to a few papers, 2 pages. Okay. So it's important that we appreciate, so that even what you are communicating through that report, our opinion is very clear. The reports to management is just management letter, where we look at the weaknesses we identified in the control systems, the consequences of those weaknesses continuing, and also making sure that we recommend. Okay, and also please ask for management responses. That's why most of these things are not released until they are discussed with management, and even those charged with governance. If there are any responses, if possible, put them as part of the report. Question 3, December 2022. Part B required students to describe 3 types of written representations. Again, if you knew your ISA 580, it should be no problem. You find there are certain issues about management responsibilities. There are certain issues required by other standards. There are certain evidence that should be supported. Okay, so if you knew that, you got your 6 marks. So knowledge in these areas is very, very important to pass your exams. Then part C, explain, giving an example. Again, give an example. The use of key audit matters, emphasis of matter, and other matters paragraph. That's so 9 marks. So which is 9 divided by 3, 3 marks each. So you actually needed to give that explaining. Key audit matter said this is just there to enhance communicative value of the audit report. It's not a modification. If it's a matter paragraph, you are emphasizing what is already disclosed in the financial statements. Other matters paragraph, you may be talking about something which is not in the financial statements. That's why you use other matters paragraph. But all these have nothing to do with modified audit opinion. So question 3, June 2022, required students, part 1, required students to explain 5 potential indicators that Makoko is not a going concern. Now, going concern is a 570. You know that? No problem. Describe 5 what procedures should be performed in assessing going concern. Again, your ISA 570 guides on what we should do. Now, going concern is not looking at evidence going backwards. Going concern is future. So look at the forecasts, look at the customer base, look at the correspondence from suppliers, those things. It has to be futuristic, not going back. June 2022, question 5, required students to comment on where the draft audit opinions given in respect of each of the 4 clients were appropriate. And if not, students were required to recommend. So meaning there were 4, marks were 12. The first thing which comes to your mind is let me divide this 12 by 4 so that you appreciate that on each client I have to give 3 points. Okay? And those 3 points, first and foremost, you yourself must know that audit opinions could be unmodified or modified. Under modified, qualified, if it's material, not pervasive. Adverse opinion, if the misstatement is material and pervasive. Disclaimer of opinion, if the lack of sufficient appropriate evidence is material and pervasive. So once you have those things, then you can actually now start addressing. Because first of all, you have to talk about what the issues are and what you yourself expect the opinion to be. And then compare with what the audit senior or whoever is recommending. And then tell us whether it's appropriate or not. If it's not appropriate, as the question required you to do, you suggest. Because if you don't suggest, you are losing out on marks. Again, a table should have done, should have been a good presentation for you. So it's important that where things are connected, do a table. March 2022, question 5, required students to explain 5 matters that should be included in the report to management. Report to management, like I said, this is management letter in our day-to-day language, management letter, where you look at what is the weaknesses, what is the cause of those weaknesses, what are we recommending as auditors, and also we ask for management response. Again, this is more of knowledge-based. If you know it, then you can get your marks. The other aspects of the question required us to identify and explain 3 indicators of going concern. Uncertainty. Now, uncertainty, we may have to, again, go back to ISA 570. Then comment on the assertion by management that the responsibility of assessing appropriateness lies with the auditors. That is only 2 marks. So the primary responsibility on these assessments lies with management. Management to assess the going concern aspect. As management, we have to, as auditors, we have to review that assessment to check whether it's reasonable or not. So it's not auditors who is going to assess these going concern. Auditors are going to review the assessment by management. And that assessment must be for at least 12 months. If it's less than 12 months, we ask them to extend. If they don't extend, we may have to contact Social Governance. If there is nothing being resolved, to have an application for audit report. Question 4, September 2022, Part D required us to explain the auditor's response to the matter that appeared after, so talking about subsequent events. Like I said, subsequent events, you've got active responsibility up to the time auditors sign the audit report. After that, they've got a passive responsibility. Management may have to inform them. And then they sit down with management, see how they intend to treat that item. Whatever they're trying to do, management must do the right thing. Even auditors must make sure that when they become aware, they must make sure the right thing is being done. Okay? And if something which may make their financial statements unreliable, they must find ways of trying to inform people not to rely on that, especially the shareholders. They should see something. At the general meeting, they make a statement. This is the end of my presentation. Okay. I hope this presentation should be taken as an excellent complement to the study text and other recommended reading material. Students must answer the question asked, not what they wanted asked. At this level, answer planning and time management are two of the key skills which complement the technical knowledge you need to pass the examination. The 15 minutes reading time and planning time must be used properly. It is hoped this presentation would significantly contribute to improved examination overall pass rates in DA11, Principles of Auditing.